Okay, this is a HDR demo. I'm going to show you how to create a HDR image using 3 exposures. So in this example, I'm going to use this one, which I think you guys have already seen it, some of you. What it is actually a church that was taken while I was in Carcassonne, France. And as you can see, I took this photo on a tripod. So there are 3 exposures. This is the zero exposure compensation version, the negative one, and the positive one. I use aperture priority of f11 to shoot this. So pretty standard picture style. So I'll just show you. I'll take these 3 images, and as you can see in the background, I've already loaded Photomatix Pro. What I'm going to do is drag these 3 images into Photomatix Pro, and immediately you'll see a pop-up. So merge for HDR processing, click on OK. It will ask you to generate from the source. Just ignore all the settings and click OK. Now over here is quite important. By default, what you'll see is something like this. Reduced noise strength is about 50%. On source images, underexposed images only, leave it as that. We won't be using the align images and reduce ghosting, because basically there's no artifacts in this particular image, and because I'm using a tripod, I don't need to align my source images. So I'll leave the default settings on with reduced noise and the reduce chromatic aberrations. So click OK. Now what's going to happen is the 3 images will load. So let it load. What's interesting about HDR is that I think some of you probably have come to some of my lessons while I was still doing Shutterbug lessons. I used to do single exposure HDRs. I don't do that anymore because the quality of those images aren't very good. They're very noisy, and I kind of like moved away from that. The images created using a single exposure also, while you can use it to show your friends on the internet, the quality isn't very good, and sometimes to the point whereby it's really ugly. So I prefer to use 3 exposures. You can use exposure stops, 1 stop or 2 stops. That means +2, -2. It's really up to you. But in this example, I didn't want to create an overdone HDR image, so I use +1 and -1 stop. So it's almost completed, the first step. Okay, we're almost there. Now the first thing's gonna come up is a pretty standard interface, and as you can see, this is the interface that you will be using to adjust the HDR image. Now I'll show you the default, how it looks like. What is the default? Okay, here we go. This is the default image. I'll make it a bit bigger. You can see the size ratio on top here, 116, 1:8. Right now it's at 1:8. That's because I was doing a portrait image earlier. But if I move it to 1/4, I try not to use fit window because it's just not very clear, not that nice. So I use 1/4. That's refreshing. Okay, there's a little nice histogram on the top right hand corner over here, which you can also use to gauge how the photo is turning out. Now at the bottom you'll see a set of preset thumbnails. You can actually use this. If you click on you can see different results coming out. Some of them are not too bad, but some of them are like I seriously don't want to encourage you to be able to use HDR images looking like this. The black and white is not bad. I sometimes use that, but I still prefer to manually adjust it. So let me set it back to the default, then we can begin. On the left hand side, these are all the adjustments. Now the first thing that you will see on the top is the tone mapping setting. Make sure that's on. The method used will be the details enhancer. Now if you click on that, you can also use tone compressor. I don't normally use that. If you click on that, I think you can see a different result, a little bit more contrasty look, but usually what I do is I leave it at details enhancer. Okay, first item, strength. So this is how strong the HDR image is going to come out. Now just to give you an idea, you can always, the default is 70, so let's say if you pull it to like 21, well, it's not so strong. So if you move it up, it looks stronger. So I'll leave it at somewhere around here. Saturation, now this is also important. Some folks like to make really gaudy looking images like this. It's fine, I mean, depending on what kind of results you want, so I'm not gonna really overdo it, so I'll just leave it at where it was just now. 46 is pretty good. Now luminosity, if you, okay, one thing about photomatics is that if you cursor over, what's usually going to happen is it's not coming up. Usually there is a not working. Anyway, if you move it, the best way to figure out what all these settings are is to move it to the extremes and see what happens. So if you move this to the extreme, okay, that's the result. If you move it all to the extreme over to the left, gets really dark. So, well, luminosity, the term means how bright you want it to be, right? So, okay, well, it's up to you how you want the final image to look like. Let's use one of the settings over here. Okay, it's not coming up. By right, there should be I wonder what's happening. There should be the help. Let's try this. Hover your mouse over a control to show contextual help. Okay, it's not working. Oh, there it is, right at the bottom. Okay, do you see it here? So, luminosity, there, it tells you. Luminosity controls the compression of the tonal range, which has the effect, blah blah blah. So roughly you know what it's all about. If you go over to micro contrast, sets how much local details are amplified. So higher value gives it a sharper look, so default value is 0. So if you move it up, you will see, you see that? And if you move it down, you see a little bit less detail. So if you move it up and you want more detail, your image will start to get a little bit more contrasty. Okay, now this one doesn't seem to be working. There are two versions of the smoothing. You can either use the light mode, which is very simple. You have the minimum, low, mid, high and maximum. If you select the minimum, you will see halos start to form, so try not to use too low. Medium is good, it's just nice. You can see moderate halos around the image, but it's fine. Maximum is when you want to use the minimum amount of HDR on the image. So this is a little bit can't really control much, so you can also uncheck the light mode and use the smoothing in terms of it's a little bit more detailed over here. You can take a negative 6.5 and you see the results, and positive 5.6, you see different results again. So you got to have an eye for this. Now if you already know the presets that you want and you don't want to pull the slider, just click on the numbers over here, key in on your keyboard, let's say 0, hit enter, and it will take you back to 0. Okay, that's for the details enhancer. So it enhances details. Basically, that's what it means. Pretty simple, right? Next, tonal settings. Now, the tonal settings is here where you can improve the global contrast. So what it actually means is you can improve how contrasty the image looks like. Now, right out of the camera, the whole reason why people do HDR is so that you can balance what is too bright and what is too dark. So in this instance, this particular image, the background is bright, the foreground is dark. So if you use HDR, you can balance the photo so that you don't have to use filters or graduated ND filters or anything like that. Now, some of you want to use HDR to create artistic photos, and when I say artistic means really contrasty, really gaudy looking photos. By all means, it's up to you. Just let you know, I don't normally do that unless I have the intention of creating an image that does not mimic reality. So it's really up to you. If you want to do it, go right ahead. But I prefer to correct exposures. I prefer to create a HDR image that looks good. It is okay to create gaudy looking HDR images once in a while. Just don't do it too often, Then suddenly you see, from 600 friends on Facebook, you have 500 friends. Do more of it and maybe you only have 400 friends later on. So up to you. Okay, here we go. White point, very simple. Drag it to the right, and what's going to happen is, oops, it's not working. Alright, and you will see a change in the photo. It's going to get brighter, right? No brainer there. Black point, that's for the dark areas. Drag it to the right, and it will get darker. Right, suddenly you see the image pop. So the contrast of the image is under the tone settings. You also have gamma. Gamma is very basic. Move it to the right and it becomes brighter but less contrasty. Bring it to the left, it becomes really dark. Sometimes you might want this kind of effect. I mean, it's up to you. Or you want to leave it at 0. Again, it's all up to you. Maybe I'll put it a little bit brighter, not too dark, but not too bright at the same time. Just want to create a little bit of dramatic effect over here. So for the color settings, this next one over here, is important if you feel that you want to correct the white balance. So very similar to the white balance that you have on your camera controls or in Photoshop, move it to the right and it will create a warmer image. Move it to the left and it creates a cool looking image. So again, it depends on what you're looking for. I would advise you to make sure your LCD is calibrated so that you can see exactly the kind of tonal white balance that you want. So in this example, I'll just leave it at 0, nothing fancy over here. Saturation highlights. Now, I don't normally use this, but it's interesting to know what it is about. If you move it to the right, you will see that the colored areas, the very colorful areas, become a little bit more highlighted. So if you look at the luminance on the blue, you should see, a highlight over here, as opposed to if you bring it down. Not sure if you understand what I'm trying to tell you. Maybe a bit technical here. You should see a change. See, the blue changes and it's not as blue. Well, it doesn't just work for blue, it works for any other color. But my recommendation is, if it doesn't add to the image, it doesn't make it more dramatic, don't use it. Same with the shadows. If you move it to the right, sorry, big buggy here. Move it to the right and you see the shadow areas, the saturation comes out. So those were the highlighted areas. It can be quite useful if you know what you're doing. Let's try an experiment. Let's move it to about midway here and a little bit here to bring out the, you know, doesn't look too bad. Maybe give it a bit of warmth, slightly. Okay. I don't know about you, but I'll just leave it at 0. Zero, 0. Okay. Next is the miscellaneous settings. Now this is a very interesting area. You got to really know what you're doing to get the results. For micro smoothing, this smooths any kind of details that you have on the image. The lower the number will give you a noisier image, but more details. But if you move this to the right, it creates a flatter looking image. So default 2 is very nice. You can see a lot of nice details, especially on the bricks over here. But sometimes this can create a very fake looking image. So if you don't want to make your image too, if someone opens your photo and says that, oh, this is a HDR image, fine. What you can do is you can move the slider on your micro smoothing, move it a bit to the right. Again, it's not working. Buggy. To the right, let's say 16, and you lose a little bit of detail. I know that the whole point of doing a HDR image is to correct exposure, but sometimes it's also a good idea to bring out details that were probably lost during the process of taking the image. So it's really up to you what you want to move this on. Depends on how your eye sees. Maybe let's put it at 6 for now and see how it looks. Okay, pretty detailed. Right. Now for highlight smoothness, this is important when you create a HDR image and you find that you have highlight areas that clip. Normally why that happens is because your 3 exposures, even your darkest one is too bright. This can happen. So if you take 3 exposures and you have a -1 third exposure, and it still clips the highlights, that means the skies are still too bright. So essentially what we're going to have is 3 images are going to have various tonal ranges, but all the 3 images will have highlights on a particular area, and usually it happens in the skies. In this area over here, you can click on that area and it will blow it up. You see, it's very bright over here, and also sometimes in the clouds, because clouds are essentially white. Close this away. Now how you can correct that is to move the slider on highlights and smoothness. If you move the slider to, let's say, 50%, look at the image and you see the bright areas start to brighten up. Now if you see 0, looks a bit it's a bit grayish in this area, right? I mean, if you look carefully, it's not really real. So you move this and you create, you let the highlights come out. So it's okay. You don't always have to create a HDR image that is HDR looking. It can look normal. Same with the for the where are we? Shadow smoothness. Now this will not affect the photo as much. If you move it, sometimes you may not see any results. It all depends on the image. A little bit there. Move it all the way to 100%. Maybe you'll see more. Correct. So basically it's the same as highlights, except that we are talking about shadows here. So if you move it all the way to the left, well, it looks kind of natural to me. So some of you don't like that, you want to move it to the right, well, by all means. Okay. So I'm going to move it to maybe 20, or all depends. Okay. Last but not least is the shadows clipping. Now what this is that certain parts of the image which have dark shadows may appear to be a little bit too crispy and you want to smoothen it a little bit, you can move this. I'm not sure if that's right because these are settings I rarely use and sometimes you don't see any effect. Oh, there we go. Only if you move it to 100%. So it smooths the shadows, making them a little bit more real but not always looking better. So I don't know, for this photo I'll just leave it at 0. Leave the 360-degree image unchecked. You can try it, even if you click it you get a slightly different result. Can you see the difference? I can. It's just slight. Okay, so are you happy with your image? If once you've done all the settings and you're happy with it, there's a button at the bottom called process. Click on it, and what's going to happen is going to tone map the 3 images that you have attempting to do HDR on, and tone map them into one image. Okay, so this is a little bit quicker process. So at the end of this process you will see the final image, which is the HDR image that you have created. So essentially all you need to do is go to File, save the image. Well, it creates as a TIFF, but if you don't want that, what you can do is you go to File, Save As, and you can choose the folder where you want to save it. This was what was created. Let's delete that, and usually bring it into, well, let's call a folder. Oh, I already have the folder. HDR, there we go. And I think I have I had an original copy of this somewhere here. So by default you will see the save as type as TIFF 16-bit. By default these are off. Save tone mapping settings, you don't really need that. Open save images, don't really need that. But one thing is important is the image type. Now obviously if you use 16-bit it's going to be really huge. 8-bit is better. JPEG means there's nothing much else you can do. Usually you want to do some touch-ups for your HDR image. Is recommended to save it under 16-bit, but it's not compulsory. You can use JPEG if you're confident to do editing using JPEG. Otherwise, leave it as its default. So this is a version 2 of my original, which I'm not very happy with. Actually, it looks better here, second version. So I'll just call it _version 2 and save it. There you go. This is your HDR. You can open it with Photoshop now to do any more editing if you wish, or if not, you can just resize it and post it on your favorite sharing website, whether it's Facebook or Flickr. Thank you very much, and hope you start creating very nice looking HDR images from this sharing that I've done. Thanks.